Good morning, and welcome to another Seize the Day. Trust you guys are doing well, and you're just having a really good morning. Yeah, just having a little trouble this morning getting online, but I hope everything is fine with you. If it's not, maybe you guys can just tell me in your chat, and I'll be able to see whether or not all of these things are coming through. But for right now, it seems like it's running okay. So, just as we continue this study, I hope you guys are waking up and feeling refreshed, ready to begin this new day. Today, as you can see, it's Thursday, May 23rd, and we have an opportunity to come together and just open up the scriptures this morning. So, we're in the midst of this study that's found now on in we're week 4 of a series called Illuminate. It's a study on the book of First John, and we are now in chapter 2, and we're looking at verses 15 through 17. Really interesting passages that you'll find laid out before you, and I trust that you'll you'll get a deeper appreciation for what this little book in our New Testament is really all about. We have been looking at this text. I just like to read it for you. So if you turn to First John chapter 2, 15 to 27, this is what we read. It says, "Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For everything in the world, the cravings of sinful man, the lust of his eyes, the boasting of what he has and does, comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but the man who does the will of God lives forever." As we saw, this was the world and doing the will of God, right? Doing the will of the world or the will of God is what is in contrast here. One is passing away, the other one lives forever. And we have to be careful that our cravings, right, our the superficiality by which we look out at the world would not lure us into turning our back on what the Lord is teaching us and how He's moving us. I brought out that Genesis chapter 3, verse 6. It's the same. It's the same lure. Like Satan's been fishing with the same bait for a long time. In Genesis 3, 6, he says, "When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it." So the idea of the cravings of our own nature, right? She saw that it was good for food, pleasing to the eye, right? So this lust of the eyes, desirable for gaining wisdom, boasting about what we boasting about what we what we are, what we do, right? All of this is the same, especially when you consider that after God had created all of this creation, He placed them as co-regents to rule over this creation and gave them that one stipulation not to eat of this one tree. And yet the cravings of of our nature, the uh, the um, the idea of it, the lust of the eyes, the boasting, pride of life, all of this comes in, and the consequences have been felt for generations to come. And so, along this line, John goes on and says, "Listen, this is the last hour, and as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have come." And that expression Antichrist is actually only found in this New Testament book of First John. The John is the one who probably is responsible for coining that expression, but Jesus taught that false Christ would appear in the last days. He says that in Matthew 24. He says it again in Mark 13. And so the idea that they're coming, there are some things that we ought to take notice of. And so I'd like to continue with this theme of thinking about this antichrist, or the plurality of these antichrists as we see them listed down here in our text. It says they went out from us, but they did not really. It says they really did not belong to us, right? That's what we're reading here. It says they went out from us, um, but they did not really belong to us. So what I wanted to do with you this morning is I just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up here that these biblical passages that refer to the Antichrist, well, they're found in Second Thessalonians chapter 2. They're found, as I said, in Matthew chapter 24. If you look around verses 23 to 25, Gospel of Mark, and then again in First and Second John and Revelation. Now, in Second Thessalonians and in Matthew and Mark, this individual is referred to as the false prophet who is to come. And I thought what would be interesting is to read the remainder of First John's letter, and then we talk a little bit about this morning about this Antichrist. It's a theme that seems to have gotten the attention of many. So let's talk about this. And first, I'll read the text. So continuing this idea of this contrast between, following the desires of this world or doing the will of God. He says there are many antichrists that have gone into the world, and they're trying to trip us up, right? They're trying to lead us astray, and they're anti the message that Christ has brought. They're all about casting doubt and moving people away from this adherence to what Jesus has been teaching. So, verse 19, he says, they went out from us, but they really did not belong to us. For if they had belonged to us, they would have remained with us. But their going showed that none of them belonged to us. Now, as you look at verse 19, I want you to recognize, right, that this group that John has now labeled as antichrists, he says they were a part of the visible community of faith. They were a part of that local assembly of believers, and yet John is saying here that you could belong to this external body, but it doesn't make you a member of the true church of God, right? Because the deciding factor isn't your public profession. What the deciding factor is here is whether or not you are doing the will of God. If you're not doing the will of God, it says, how many times have we already studied in this book? It says, if you say that you know him, but walk in darkness, the truth is not in you. If you say you know him, but continue, in rebellion, he says you don't know him. In fact, he calls them liars. He says the truth is just not in you. So that comparison here is what's going on in this text, but it's coming not so much externally as we read in some of those other passages that I just showed you, but it's internal. Like this is coming from within. So you not only have this opposition to the gospel that sometimes happens out in the world, but here's another little wake up call. Sometimes it could happen from the inside. That's why it can be so disturbing. Sometimes you listen to these preachers; they're preaching a false gospel. They're talking about all of this hope, and they paint these pictures that are so far removed from what the scriptures are teaching, and people get confused, and they think like, hey, well, it's a man of God, it's a woman of God. They're here teaching. They probably know better. But come on, like we can't be that naive. Just think about the world in which we're living, and you recognize, listen, not everybody that puts out a shingle that says they're medical doctors, meaning that they're proficient, right? Like there's a lot of quacks out there. You can have those who are upright, in their profession. They could be let's say lawyers, right? And then you could go out there and find some real shysters. You know, it's the same in the church. Not everybody who's making these professions are who they say they are. Jesus would say that. Jesus said, he says, listen, um, uh, not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father. He says, beware of those who come to you, and outwardly they appear as sheep, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. This is all in the Gospel of Matthew, right? In the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus says, by their fruit you shall know them. He says, you can't get good fruit from a bad tree, and you're not going to get bad fruit from a good tree. So the idea here is then it's not just a profession, it's also, is my life in line with what God's word is teaching? And when it's not, it should be a call for you and I to repent. It should be a wake-up call. It's like you look in a mirror and you got a smudge on your face, you got to wash it off. It's the same thing with one's soul. There are times that I could get so caught up in this world, and God is saying, hey, listen, can I just get your attention here, because this isn't good. And if we really know Jesus, the Spirit of God begins to just bring a sense of conviction, and the next thing you know, man, we're moving closer and closer to what God is calling us, to this truth that that the Apostle John right now is letting us look at. So one of the it says, let's go. Let's talk a little bit about this idea of this Antichrist that has come into the world, right? And he says, and now they're not really a part of us. There's a couple of things that I'd like for you to see. Um, just in full disclosure, in some of my studies here, I was looking at a commentary by Professor Krauss, who wrote a commentary called "The Letters of John." Really a solid scholar, and so he wrote just a brief little blurb here on this whole idea of these antichrists that are coming into the world. And so I thought I would just share some of this with you. He said, first of all, he says a number of things are significant to our understanding, right, of this passage. And he says, listen, first, it's clear that the coming of a powerful antichrist figure was part of the early Christian teaching, right? Because he said, what we just read before, it says, you have heard that the antichrist is coming, but I say to you that there are many antichrists that have already gone out into the world. So this idea of those who are false teachers, who are leading people astray, John is warning them of what is going on right now in their community of faith, and how they have to pay attention to not just what people are saying, but how they're living. They have to pay attention to see whether or not their life is beginning to demonstrate that they are in sync with what God